as you see, I'm forming at least a double line all the way up to that beach, and then back it up by tanks. And then the aircraft that I just bought are inverted because they're spent, but they go in this position. So at next turn, they're turned over and able to protect the entire line. So what you have to watch for is the turn flip-flop I explained earlier, because when our axis turn is done, the Allies, if they wish, can choose not to spend down to less than what the Germans have. And so when you go to the next turn, you determine initiative. And you determine the initiative by who has the most BRPs. So if the Allies have more BRPs, they're going to go first. Then they get the turn flip-flop because they're going second in this turn, then first next turn. That's 2 turns in a row. And the only reason the Allies would do that, if they think they can get Berlin, which is covered by that plane right there, or Rome. Now the Italians haven't gone yet. We're going to set up their defenses so they can't be taken out in 2 turns. Everything is defended against this turn flip-flop. One thing to note, if the Allies take the turn flip-flop, it will give the Axis a turn flip-flop, because then next turn the Allies go first, so they get 2 turns in a row, and then the Germans go. But then the next turn after that is the spring of 1940, and the Germans are going to have more money to start. When you determine initiative, they're going to go first and then get 2 turns in a row. To give the Germans 2 turns in a row would be more devastating to the French than what the French and the British can do to the Germans or Italians. That's why the only reason the Allies will take a turn flip-flop here is to capture Rome or Berlin. For the Italians, I'm not going to videotape move by move and everything I'm doing like I did in the Germans. I'll just tell you the phase I'm doing, then I'm just going to do it, then I'll bring back and show you what I did. Moving phase was very simple. The 1-3 moved from the Po River there down next to the tank. The airplane here that's based at Naples, it just shifts over to the air base to get out of air range of Allied planes.
Planes that could base there at Corsica. You can see it at the top of this map. It's the brown beach there, that port. They can actually base there and or even take Sardinia and reach Naples. So you got to move the Italian plane over or just set it up over.
And start. Remember, it's all about losing money. You want to lose the least amount of money as possible. So we go to the builds phase. The builds, you can see Italy right there, 75, 75 base, 75. Half their spending limit is 37. So they can spend $37 on build. Now I just placed the Italian units here that I bought. You can see I bought 423 infantry corps, that's 6 fleet, all 6 replacements, and the 25 armored corps. So I bought all the infantry and land troops first, then what I had left I bought as many ships as I could. They had a 9 fleet allowable to be built, but I can only get 6 of them, then I'm out of money. So the Italians spend half of their BRPs they're possible, they're down to 38 BRPs. And now I'm going to go to placement. There's the Italian placement. I put a 2-3 on the border, backed up by those replacements. This prevents the Allies trying to take a turn flip-flop, getting 2 turns in a row and trying to march down here to Rome. I have a 2-3 and a replacement on this beach to help prevent any invasion. The Allies try to come there and get to Rome. It's protected by air support.
So let me state another rule here. On the European side, no invasions can be conducted unless you have a friendly supplied port within 7 hexes of the beach that you're going to invade. So on the Italian front, the southern beach where you see the 3-3, that has a 3-3 and a 2-3 that I built put under that. That has to be strong because Malta's within 7 hexes of that. So when the British invade, if they come over with, let's say, 5, 6 factors, it takes 3 times the amount of ships to carry that. So let's say it's 5, they need 15 ships to carry it, and the rest of their ships can shore bombard it. But the northern beach, where I put the 2-3 in a replacement that I built, they don't have, the Allies do not have a port within 7 hexes of that. Therefore, if you're gonna conduct an invasion there, you need more than 3 times the amount of ships to carry that. You need 6 times the amount. So if you were to carry 5 times 6, you need 24 ships to carry that. So that's why you don't have to protect that as heavily as you do the southern beach. But in any case, the 5-4 aircraft, the Italian 5-4 aircraft, is supporting both beaches. So that's why those beaches are covered.
And then you have a replacement there and a replacement underneath the air to prevent him to keep going to Rome. The 1-3 that was here SR'd to Rome. So that's 1 SR. The Italians have 6 SRs. These fleets were used to SR a 2-3 to Africa, which goes on Tripoli, a tank which goes here. The 1-3 that was on Tripoli went to the beach here. This defense prevents the British from trying to come into this beach area and either going this way and creating a lot of damage or getting to Tripoli and creating a lot of damage. So, not saying that the British can't do it, but would you really trade a turn flip-flop for trying to get close to taking Libya out and giving the Germans a turn flip-flop here in France and losing France early in the game? No, you wouldn't. So if you just defend Italy like this, it will be protected by the turn flip-flop. Okay, the French. The French are going to move 2 units from the front of Paris to make way for armored units. So this one will just go to here, and this one will go to here. Okay? That's basically all the movement we're going to do for the French. And then we're going to build
everything in their force pole, which is 18 BRPs. So the French start at 85 BRPs. They go down to 67 BRPs. They built.
the armored unit goes in front. We like to get the most power we can at the most important spots on the German frontier. The infantry unit, one goes in Paris, one goes behind Paris. This one SRs up to the hex south of Paris. And then one of the replacements we bought goes right there. The other replacement we bought goes there. That is the French defense. Okay, so we're good. Now this is just opening defense again. I still want to leave this tank here in case the Germans try to come down this way. But eventually, we try to improve all these hexes with army units. Because remember, infantry getting hit by exploiting armor are minus DM. So, but as of right now, we're not worried about it yet. And we don't want to take the turn flip-flop. We're not going after Rome or England. So it's the English turn. Their biggest priority, I think, in 39 is the German raiders to come out and take money from England. And that's why I base a 9 fleet here and a 9 fleet here. Those are to watch German raiders. Now German raiders are allowed to move to the western edge of the board because they go way out to the Atlantic and raid shipping. So they can get there this way. That's why I like the 5-4 based here, because the 5-4 British aircraft can start attacking German ships 4-way, and they can hit them all along the route besides having a British movement. So the first thing I like to do is get this 1-3 down here, because we're going to construct an infantry unit, a stronger one, and put it there. So the 1-3 goes down there. Here on Gibraltar, since we're not invading right now, we take these 2 ships and they get moved up to England on that hex. Right there on that hex. And that's the movement phase for the British. Now they go to build. Their spending limit, if you look on their chart, is 62 BRPs. That's 62 BRPs exactly. All this is for the defense of the English. Now they're allowed to build 3 infantry factors in Egypt. So this Austrian Corps gets built in Egypt actually, and gets SR to this spot right here. That's 1 SR for the British. This British plane will move to Caen. And then our once per turn placement of an airbase we will put right there. That's the British movement. Now we're back to SRs. So we leave this tank and this infantry, the British Expeditionary Force, and the Poles, who just got kicked out of Poland. They're going to be the British Expeditionary Force, the first ones to arrive in France. Now there's 7 factors there. I need 14 factors to transport them. I'm going to go ahead and send 18. It gives me 4 to spare in case the Germans try to intercept this, plus another 9 fleet and a British aircraft. Okay. Now if I'm the Germans, the German Navy is it's hard to rebuild once you start losing it. To me, you use the German Navy in the beginning for raiding, to try to take British BRPs. To try to stop this isn't really helping your cause very much. So I do not intercept. So the transfer of SRing British units to France succeeds. These ships are now spent. They go back to Plymouth and are inverted. And these units are brought in to France. Just like that. Okay? Because of our Anglo-French cooperation, we're allowed to stack. The new 5-4 plane we built gets inverted and it's placed on the newly built airbase. The 9 fleet that we built gets inverted and it goes in our port, our anchor port. That's where you construct ships. The replacements are placed around ports because, let me explain some. When the Germans try to invade, the problem isn't really beating what's on the beach, off the beach. It's what happens after it. So I sort of give them the beach. The airborne unit, if it's used and it's dropped right here, it can kill this unit. Well, the whole point of the airborne unit is to take a port and then SR stuff in behind it. Well, you can't SR adjacent to British units. That's why I always keep people on the outside adjacent to where the airborne unit is probably going to drop. And that's why this one's up here, because if the airborne drops right here, he can't SR any troops there. It always gives me time to counterattack. I have plenty of forces. This plane SRs across here, the French colonies. Remember, we can go in them now. You come up this way and you move into the French territory. This 9, you don't need the whole 9, but it don't matter. It's the end of the turn. At the end of the turn, everything comes back. So I don't care if I spend my British ships now or not, because the next turn they're all fresh. This one will carry the Iraqi 1-4 in there into the French port up to the top here. So we're getting air forces up here, and of course they can watch the raiders along with these ships, and no raiders come through this way. The raiders are going to be forced to go to the weaker route, which is up top. So the British and the French turn are done.
This is when you determine who's going to have more BRPs to see who goes first the next turn. Remember, the Allies have just taken their turn. So when you're last in the current turn, you always see where the BRPs lie and see if you want to take a turn flip-flop for the next turn. So you look right now, you know the French are at 67 BRPs. The British have 62. That comes to 129 BRPs. The Italians, they see, have 38 BRPs left, and the Germans have 75 BRPs left. That comes to 113 BRPs. That's a difference of 26 BRPs. So the Allies can choose to stop right here and then go to the next turn, and then you determine who has more BRPs and who has the initiative. It would be the Allies, so they would get a second turn in a row. Now, does that help them? Right now, absolutely not. There's nothing they can do. The only way they would want to take a second turn is if they think they can bust through the German line or take Rome, and they can't do it. So if you take a second turn just to kind of bolster your defense or kill some Germans, it's not going to help you, because remember, then the Germans will go. And then in the spring, the next turn, spring 1940, you determine BRPs again and who has the most, and the Germans are going to have way more than you, and they're going to go again, and you're going to give the Germans 2 turns in a row. And if you give the Germans 2 turns in a row, he's going to take Paris in spring, and you don't want that. So you don't want the turn flip-flop, so you got to burn BRPs. And you burn the BRPs now during the unit construction. Now, you don't want to take BRPs off the British, because you don't know what's going to happen in the Raider phase, and they can't afford to lose money anyways. So you burn money off the French. So you take enough money off, you're left with 50 BRPs on the French. So 50 and 62 is now 112 BRPs. You're 1 point below the Axis. Therefore, it will be the Axis turn next turn, and not yours. And that's what you want. So be careful on these turn flip-flops. You really have to watch the BRP total when you go into the next turn. So after this is done, then you move to the Raider phase.
Russians are pretty basic. Remember, we failed on the subversion. So now we can take Bessarabia and not affect our subversion result. And as long as we take Bessarabia in 1 turn here, it doesn't hurt us on the Russian table. So that is a definite. We don't have the power to do that one and the Finnish one. And I believe this is more important to me, to keep the Russians in the game longer in the south, is to take this extra row of hexes. So as long as you have it lined up, set up the way I do the Russians here, with these forces just like this, and that tank, and this tank, and the 2 aircraft rebasing here, you can take whatever the Romanians mount against you on those cities. Now for the Romanians part, if they were to mount their strongest defense, it would be 3 factors there and 3 factors in that city, backed by the air factor. The Romanians would lose all that. The Russians would take it. But the Germans have to rebuild the Romanian units. And with what I'm trying to do with Germany, they don't have the money for that at all. So for the Romanians and the Germans here, we would just put a 1-3 on that city and 1-3 on that city. At least make the Russians fight for it, but I don't want to be buying back a bunch of stuff. If we don't buy back the Romanian army, then it hurts us on the diplomatic table. So the Russians in their turn are going to attack Bessarabia. When they occupy Eastern Poland or the Baltic states, those affect the Russian table. So I don't want to do them both, I only want to do one. And I'll do Eastern Poland, because if I don't, the Germans are able to come in and occupy it, and I can't give the Germans all that ground either. So the Russians will occupy Eastern Poland, take 1 hit on the Russian modifier table. But that's it. Other than that, the Russians will build some troops, and their turn's done. So let's get the Romanians on the board. This is the Russian movement. He's just moving up. You have to take the cities in Eastern Poland to control it, so they make sure they walk over each city, and they just start getting a line formed. Right here you have 2 3-to-1 attacks. Here we go. First one is a 5. Second one is a 4. If you look over here on our chart at a 3-to-1 attack, You see the 4 is defender eliminated, and 5 defender eliminated. So both attacks succeed. This one, the Romanian, is dead, and we walk in and occupy the vacated hex with that Russian. This Romanian is dead, and we walk in and occupy this Romanian hex with that 2-3. The Romanian units, being dead, go in the German force pole to be built.
And the Russian turn is done. You just basically start building your frontline units and drawing a line across the entire eastern front. The Germans are too busy in the west to mess with you, and you can't declare war because of the Russian modification table. So just start getting your troops along the front and building them. And that's it. Russian's turn is done.
So let's complete the U.S. axis tension table. Now the chart is pretty self-explanatory, okay? You follow the modifiers. You see this is automatic modifier, +2 each game turn, starting in fall. So, we already took the first turn, so that's 2 here. And I just write turn on here. Then, you go down to modifiers. DPs, nothing yet. Status, nothing yet. Now each full offensive option by the Axis, including a neutral Germany or Germany's free offensive on the Eastern Front, add 1. So put 1 for the offensive. Okay. Anything else? Let's see. Yes, they declared war on Denmark. And that's 1. Anything else? Russian occupation of eastern Poland, -1. So we have 1 declaration of war for Germany. Okay, declaration of war. But then eastern Poland goes back down 1. So we actually don't have to use this. So we're only at a 3. I just like keeping track for future. Okay, goes back down to 3. So far the tension table is at 3. You see the green box? When the tension table hits 7, something gets to happen as far as our American response or Allied response. So right now we're at 3. Let's see what the Japanese. This would be the Japanese tension level. So first thing we do here, it's only +1 each automatic modifier each game turn. So right here is already 1, and then depending on what the Japanese do this turn, we'll see what happens. So the Japanese, I took an attrition against the nationalist Chinese. That's the white Chinese. You get to add this group, and I add this. I only came up with 20 factors. So I had moved the armor unit I had back here to the front line and moved the 1-2 out. So I got 21 factors. I rolled a 5. It eliminated 2 Chinese counters. So they took off 2 replacements. Now,
So against the communists, you can only get on the 11 to 20 table. And I rolled a 6, which is 1 communist counter, so they take it off. Now, it must be noted that you can only ever get over 11, it's somewhere between 11 and 20 if you use the strongest Japanese units we have. You can never hit 21 there, so until you start making ground. So the 11 to 20 is the best you can do, and what you're hoping for is a 1 or a 2. And then you can start really making some headway in the communists, and that's what we're going to try to do against them.
we'll construct some, if I don't build the carrier or the fleets, I don't move the Axis tension table up. So I'll just probably build the infantry in that tank and ship some, maybe 1 or 2 to China, but the rest will get ready to occupy islands out here so we can start our setup to conquer the Pacific Islands and get our BRPs down here in Southeast Asia. So Japan's build was all just the infantry and the one tank. Half of it stayed in Japan. I put a few more in China. Just in case we lose some units and we have some gaps, I'll move the infantry up. But other than that, I really don't need any more in China. And we'll be removing some actually when we start our big wars here. But it doesn't affect the tension table. So the tension table only has the +1 for the turn, and that's it. And so the Americans' turn, they don't do anything. That's why we kind of just didn't do their turn. Their setup stays the same. They don't build anything until they go to war, so they're good. So the only other turn left is China.
Now the Chinese setup is revised. I moved things around from the original setup I showed you in the beginning. And that's because I want to protect Chongqing, because the Japanese, an ambitious Japanese player, can use his tanks and break through the front Chinese line and exploit to Chongqing and take that capital, which gives the Japanese more money, me less money, and hurts us on the Chinese resistance table. So I changed the setup. So we now protect Chongqing, and we put 2 lines of Chinese units right through the valley where the Japanese would have to go. Because in the Pacific board, you have to stop when you hit mountain hex. You can't move through it. And so we took the units from the coast here between these 2 Japanese beachheads. I'm going to leave those open, and we keep the infantry around this one beach hex. I really don't want them moving south or outward from there. And then I put the replacements right behind the front line. So that's the revised Chinese setup. So on the Chinese turn, I'm really interested in trying to get the Chinese objectives back from the Japanese, because they'll lose money, and they can afford it, but it helps the Chinese and hurts the Japanese. So that's the 2 hexes we're always looking for. And that's why you see a big Chinese commitment of all their 2-2 infantry corps right over here, because I can get 1-to-1 on these hexes. Now, as of right now, the Japanese have aircraft stationed within range of this, and they can fly defensive air support, add more factors to those hexes, and then knock me down to 1-to-2. And then if I lose that, then I lose a lot of troops. So I'm not going to do that. We'll wait till the Japanese remove their aircraft from there, where it'll be much needed on other fronts. So in the meantime, for the first few turns, we just are attrition. So we add up all our counters against all the white Chinese counters, nationalists, against the Japanese, and we usually get the 21 table. And that's where we're at.
And they rolled a 5, which eliminated 1 Japanese counter, which that's why I threw those in the back.
So then when we look at the communist Chinese, they get the free offensive, remember. So if they can take 1-to-1s and have a chance of eliminating some good Japanese units, they will. But with the river there right now, you can't even get 1-to-1s. So they're going to attrition also.
We'll see what the outcome is on that. This rolled for an attrition. They rolled a 3 on, they had 6 counters, and that is a miss, so nothing happened with them. Okay, so our builds, we bolster our defense. We'll put more right in this area, and maybe 1 piece to block the row of the beaches heads there. So there's some bolstering the defense. We put 1 just to block the route between those 2, and we keep bolstering right there. We don't have to do much. The communist build is free, and that communist unit goes right back on the capital. So nothing's changed there. That's usually the way that front goes until Japanese start pulling forces out and they start getting weaker. Well, it looks like we've completed the first turn of 1939. So let's get to raider activity. Now the Germans, we like to send out our raiders. Let me give you some rules on the raiders. The raiders are trying to break out into the Atlantic Ocean. in the Atlantic Ocean, they can sink merchant ships. So the fewer ships that are operating on their own, or just with a couple, the more likely of a chance they have to break out into the Atlantic. So 3 or less ships have a high success rate of getting to the Atlantic. A strength between 4 and 6 has an even chance, and a ship strength of 7 or more will most likely be intercepted and attacked. So as the Germans, I like to send out, you can send out raiders from a single port, but since this is a dual port, you can send out raiders, 2 of them, because it's a dual port. So we send out 2 German raiders. We're allowed to go out to the Atlantic. If we come this way, he still has British fleets there and British aircraft and can attack us, which makes it difficult. So I like to come out up here and go around Scapa Flow, and I like to break down these 9s into a 6 and a 3 and a 6 and a 3.
So when the Germans can break down each 9 if they choose, and I like to break it down to a 6 and a 3. The 6, remember, if they try to intercept that, it's an even roll. The 3 fleet, they have to add 1 to their dice. And then the other 9 I break down to a 3 and a 6. Now in return, the British bring a 9 from Scapa Flow, break it down to a 3 and 6, and they bring another 9 from the other port at Rayoth and break it down to a 6 and a 3.
So we have 4 interception attempts. Okay, the British die roll, the 3 British ship intercepting the 3 German ship, you have to roll the dice. You have to get a 1, 2, or 3 and add 1 to the dice because it's 3 factors or less, and the British missed. That means this German ship makes it into the Atlantic. The other 3 British fleets intercepting the 3 Germans, it also misses. And this breaks into the Atlantic. The 6 interception succeeds, so that one's intercepted. This one misses, so this one breaks into the Atlantic. So we only have 1 battle. These other ships return home. They failed the interceptions, but failing an interception does not cause you to be used. So there's 1 battle. Germans against the British right there.
First thing you look at before you roll is the Naval National die roll modifier. You can see Germany's a category 1, the British category 2. The difference is a 1. So the Germans get to add 1 to their fleet battles. The British have to subtract 1. So you roll the dice, and it ends up being a 4 to a 2 in the German favor. Therefore, the British lose 2, the Germans lose half of that, and they lose 1. And so the Germans win the battle, so that 6 ship becomes a 5 and it moves on out to the Atlantic. So each raider that succeeded in breaking out to the Atlantic can remove 1 BRP from the British total. So there's 17 German raiders that made it. The British lose 17 BRPs, and that's what we're trying to do to the British. Now for every 3 BRPs that the British lose, they lose an SR. So basically they have 4 SRs for the following turn. Instead of having 9, they can only SR 4 units. And that completes our 1939 fall turn. The first turn is done.